Hello, everyone. Our next session is about to begin. First, I want to thank Amore and Illinois Women in Cannabis for having me here earlier as a panelist, and now to introduce our moderator. I think something is very important to say, right? It's one of those things that we kind of assume. Our men need to be more comfortable speaking up to empower our women. If you have this sting, if when you hear something about women's empowerment, you get this sting in your chest or you get this like weird feeling, that's just your ego. It's okay. No, I'm being serious, and it's not a male female thing. It is a human thing. I think a lot of times as men, when we hear like a women's initiative, we're like, oh, well, it's not for us. This isn't about you, right? This is about equality and empowerment. So I just want to thank Amore for allowing me to be an ally in the space. And without any further ado, thank you. But I would like to introduce our moderator for our next session, Anderson from HT23.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. You all are still awake after the pasta and the salads and the long day, so I'm appreciative of you being here. I'm super excited. I feel like we've talked back and forth in email and for a couple of minutes, and like we're besties now, so you're stuck with me. And so I'm super excited about us being here and moderating, having the opportunity to moderate this panel where we're talking about the whole concept of philanthropy and community engagement in the cannabis industry. And so I am super duper excited to be able to converse with these dynamic women. Ty Duncan, the Vice President of Community Integration with Cresco. And then I have Jai Kinsey, the Director of Social Impact with Green Thumb Industry, GTI, and Asia Hill, the Social Responsibility Manager at Curaleaf. So this is near and dear to my heart. Thank you. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for taking the time to come out. We know that your schedules are super busy. This topic is very near and dear to my heart. As Stephen stated, I am Dr. Angelyn Anderson, and I am the VP of Equity and Community Engagement with HT23 Growers. We are one of the first African-American owned craft grow licensees here in the state of Illinois, so we were one of the 40s. We were super excited about that. We're excited to get stood up, and I'm excited to have this dialogue and conversation. So I want to go ahead and jump in. Just in case you're in a food coma and you're trying to figure out what we're talking about and what we're covering, give you a brief overview of what was in the program. We're going to talk about best practices for actively engaging staff, creating a volunteer infrastructure, establishing meaningful relationships with community partners, and navigating the challenges and special opportunities of civic engagement in the cannabis industry. So I want to go ahead and jump in and talk about the elephant in the room, cannabis, and how we can go about destigmatizing it. So my first question for you all, and jump in as you feel led, is to ask you, what has been the most challenging part in educating the community and destigmatizing cannabis overall?
Oh, I guess everyone's looking at me. I'll start. So thank you for that question. I wouldn't say so much challenging, but just a great opportunity. And Peter Contos talked about it earlier on his panel with the advocacy groups, talking about having those bilingual materials. And so I feel like at GTI, we're really looking for opportunities to reach the Latino population in a very authentic and special way. So that means, going that extra step of providing education and materials that are easy to understand, that are really resonate with the community. And so I think just providing those materials, those extra conversations that you can have with communities, being authentic, and just providing materials that are able to share from generationally through communities. And I feel like through the Latino community, a lot of the outreach that we want to do there is really focused on just how can we authentically reach the community and provide those materials, like I said, in bilingual materials to share. So that will help to break that stigma. There's a lot of stigma attached to cannabis due to the violence from like Mexico and other places. And so I feel like that is an area where we could really help to break those barriers.
I would also say, as we do community engagement, being a large MSO, being the face of a large cannabis company, obviously there is the stigma around cannabis as a whole. And really getting our foot in the door to build these deep relationships with these communities that we can fundraise for, but how can we also build programming in the communities with these organizations? So some organizations won't take our funds, some organizations will take our funds, but they don't want to talk about taking our funds. And so how can we take this and make it into a learning experience for these organizations as we build out these partnerships, we can do more than fundraise for you in secret. We can also really help you build out what cannabis really means and how it can be impactful to the communities that you are serving.
For sure, I've definitely, our company has dealt with folks who don't want or can't take our money to get federal funding and are not able to do it, or they can but don't want to talk about it, like you said. And so there's been some education there, but I think, you know, we try to do it through the wellness piece of things as well. You know, we have an education center in Pittsburgh, and so we've done like yoga and other sort of like wellness programming out there that I think helps bridge that gap between the sort of hanging out in someone's dirty basement, you know, smoking out of your bong with the roller coaster in the back. We sort of bridge that gap between that concept of cannabis and like the wellness piece of it too.
Awesome. And so part of building and bridging those relationships and kind of breaking down those barriers and the stigma that is associated with cannabis, whether it's growing it, smoking it, or being an advocate for it, because there are many CEOs who run MSOs that don't even touch it, right? But they're in the business. They see that it's a money business. And so I think that it is super important to really start with foundationally, after you've kind of been working on that issue of stigma, which is going to be an ongoing thing that we all are facing. What is it that you're doing with your foundation specifically? What was your initial approach when it came to building these relationships, and how has that evolved? And then what shifts have you like made in that process of learning and growing?
I mean, you know, coming into this space, I think it is so important to just listen first. And working with these community partners, and you know, I come from somewhat a legacy background. My brother-in-law sells weed to this day, you know, since I was 8 years old. And just listening to people who are in the community. You can't build out a program without knowing, you know, what is the need in the community. And I always talk about how, you know, GTI and we all are doing community work where we are a resource here for the community. We're here to be a resource and to be a platform for them to amplify the voices that they already have. We're not in a space where, you know, you just want, and I come from the nonprofit side, where I had corporations coming to me to say, you know, here, do this, do that, we want you to do this. But it was refreshing to have a company come to the table and sit with us as a true partner and say, how can we help you? What do you need? What do you want? And what is it that we can do to move the needle to support the community that you are looking to serve? So I feel like it's our duty to do that, and especially in the cannabis space, because of the dues we owe to Black and brown community members. And so I feel like that is, and so when building out like our plan for the year, it was that listening piece first, and then going into a space of building a structure and strategy around it. But even with that, I had conversations with brand founders when looking at how we can diversify our brand space. Had calls with brand founders to say, okay, what is it do you need? What else can I help you with? What are some other areas? And it shifted the whole strategy in terms of what we were planning to do. And so I feel like that listening piece is so important and so key, because you cannot build a structure and a program without knowing exactly what the needs are from the individuals you're serving.
And I would say that, I mean, listening, of course, always first, and then building the meaningful partnerships that aren't just like writing a check. I mean, there's certainly times when you do that, but I think that that's been the evolution too, is that we build partnerships and relationships that are deeper, that are not just the check writing, or not even just the volunteering. We've done some things where, you know, with sustainability, where if we're getting rid of some cultivation lights, and a local organization that does community gardening could use them, and now we're able to repurpose these things that, you know, we don't need them anymore, but they could really use, you know, thousands of dollars worth of lighting to help their business grow. So then, you know, the community now gets this garden. So you think about the different levels of engagement. So I think that's one thing we've evolved to, is understanding our partnerships from listening, growing them a little bit deeper through multiple channels of support, and then also growing year to year, doing, you know, not just having a one-time event with someone, but sort of building that foundation.
And for us, I think it's being intentional with what partners we choose and what companies we choose to work with as well. So we know that while we're here because we are working in an industry that was once illegal. So when we start to think about how we give back, we need to give back to those communities that have been negatively impacted by that illegal portion, by the war on drugs. And so when we're partnering with organizations, we're picking the ones who are intentionally in these communities, working in areas in these communities that we can pick: food insecurity, environmental sustainability, second chance hiring. How can we really give back to the organizations that are already doing that work? how can we support you, and then how can we build out the work you're already doing so that we can also be a benefactor of that in terms of if we are doing second chance hiring, how can they work for Curaleaf? How can you work for some of the smaller social equity businesses that we are working with as well? So just being very intentional with who we are working with.
Thank you. So we're talking about intentionality and listening. So we can hear stuff, but also listening to it and then giving back if there's a gap or a space that we have something and they need, giving that back to the community. And we all know that this cannabis industry is absolutely about building relationships, from having craft growers or cultivation centers have relationships with dispensaries to get their products in and on the shelves and so forth and so on, right? And so I wanted to ask you about how is it, or what have you found to be the one thing that has contributed to establishing those, and you've touched on it a little bit, but dig a little bit deeper and establishing those things, and maybe even giving examples, of course, without exposing what those, those organizations are. But what have you found to be the one thing that's contributed to building those strong relationships within the community and with community partners?
Yeah, be authentic. Be who you are. I don't wear a mask. This is who you see is what you get. And when I meet with my partners, it's like family. Like when we got up here, we talked and it was like we've known each other for 15 years. And so, I mean, it's one of those things where, being authentic, being trustworthy, and do what you say you're going to do. Do the work. It takes a lot of work, and I know all of us are working really hard, but it takes a lot of work, but you have to do it because there have been so much damage and people have heard what other organizations will do and people have been disappointed. So you have to be that true partner to come to the table and to deliver what they're asking, and really be that partner that'll come to the table, like I just mentioned earlier, to not tell them what to do, but to ask them what they need from you and how you can support them. And, it's like I said, I mean, when I talk about being authentic, I mean, this next Friday, I'm going to someone's cookout, a partner. I'm bringing my dad and my son to just show that, I'm not here to just write checks for what you're doing. And coming from the nonprofit side and seeing how important it is to have relationships in multiple areas within the organization. It's not just we're doing a sponsorship. Where is this year-long of activities that we can do with you where there's multiple touch points, where I can show you we're not just here for the one-off, we're here for the long run. And we're here to be a true partner to you, so that being authentic, being trustworthy, saying what you're, doing what you say you're going to do. Everybody hears the walk. It's important because as soon as you don't, it's a wrap. And so you have to be that partner that is there and doing what you say you're going to do.
I think, definitely being transparent for sure is a big part of that. In addition to that, I would have to say, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Can we jump in there?
Can you repeat the question?
Basically, it's about what's the one thing that's contributed to you establishing those successful relationships?
For us, it's working in the community. So we had the opportunity to either take our CSR work and make it national, work with these large non-for-profit organizations, other large MSOs. But as we started to try to reach out to them, we realized that they don't want to work with Curaleaf, specifically if you're not in the cannabis industry. And it's forced us to take a community engagement stance when it comes to that. So we're working with smaller breast cancer organizations, smaller food banks from the communities that our dispensaries are in. And we're building those relationships with those organizations, and our dispensary agents are seeing the work that we're doing. They're coming to our stores. And so just making sure that we have that connection between that organization and the people who are literally selling our product every day, and they can really speak to the work that we're doing with those organizations.
Yeah, the hyper-local focus is something that we've also found to be really helpful. In part, it gets our local staff engaged too. So we have a strong volunteer program at Cresco, and we don't have staff for community integration all over the country. I do have one here right now, Angelyn, who is my wonderful teammate at Cresco. But we really rely on our dispensary teams and our other staff, cultivation staff, to go to the communities. And so it's important to us. We'll ask them, the staff, like, what matters to you when you walk outside of Williamsburg Dispensary? What do you see? What are the issues that are faced in your community? And then we'll help you find groups that will serve those purposes, but we want to make sure that the staff who's volunteering is invested, but also that the community organizations want to work with us and that their issues are relevant to our mission and our values, as well as the needs that we're able to serve for them. And that's part of it too, is the multi-level engagement I mentioned a little bit before, is can we give an in-kind donation where, we're getting rid of some office furniture and you guys need a printer, some chairs, and then can we also send volunteers out? When you have a gala, can we also, sponsor some part of that? And so trying to find ways to engage in different ways, but also deeper ways. There's times when people will say, oh, we look for internships. Well, we don't actually have those available right now, but what else do you need? What would make a difference? What are you paying for right now that we could help subsidize? We actually need some feminine hygiene products, or we need personal care stuff. Well, we can do that. Let's do an Amazon wish list and we can give that to you. That's, I think, a next level of engagement that people aren't really used to always experiencing.
So moving beyond those one and done relationships or experiences and interactions, it sounds like. So a lot of times I think that organizations, just my experience in being on different boards and serving in different capacities, some organizations are fixed on that one and done relationship where it's, hey, we have this event, buy a ticket. Hey, we have this event, we have a holiday drive, can you bring a toy? And they come to you and they're like, every year you're giving these things, right? And so moving beyond those one and dones, because you're not getting integrated into the community. And ultimately, if we're doing this work because we want to engage, it has to be a full-on integration and it has to be a full-on relationship building thing. So you touched on something that I'm going to come to in a second, but I wanted to also ask a question relating to what is your most memorable experience as you were building a relationship in the community? We all can think of that one where we're like, oh God, I'm glad that they're gone. But what is that one where you're like, this really made the cackles of my soul kind of warm up and make me happy and excited?
I would say that it's more, for us, it was more of an event than a particular organization. So we did our first company-wide volunteer day. It was actually 2 days last year. And to see the unifying effort of our team. So I think that was, building that program was exciting because, yes, we built individual organization relationships, but for me, the biggest joy was to see all the photographs from across the country. I think it was like 30 cities we were in across the country that did volunteering with their teammates. And to see that, us with the people that have Tap for Humanity, or people from a small organization like a Big View Pantry, we have pictures with them, we engage with them, we have relationships now, but the bigger picture of our whole company getting behind it really made it feel so special.
That's awesome.
I think for me, it's when we have a potential organization to partner with, and then I jump on a call with them, and you can tell there's a hesitation with working with us. You can tell they're like, oh, you're just a cannabis company. What do you want from us? And then as we start to dig deep into the work that we've been doing in the community, the work that we're trying to see in the community, and how we'd like to partner, and how it's very intentional in what we're saying to them, their whole attitudes will shift. And they're like, oh, you actually care. We're not just a paycheck. You're not just trying to write us off one and done. And to me, every time we have those conversations and we build these partnerships, that initial conversation, seeing their transition from skeptical to sure has always been like my highlight.
Yeah, I think for me, something that was really special just recently, I was on a webinar for Black History Month. We hosted a webinar and we had 3 Black men from 3 different companies, Roll Up Life in New Jersey, Tetragram, the app, and 420 events. And just being a Black woman on that panel and supporting and like knowing that, our company was supporting, in addition to an organization, but these 3 Black men who have become trailblazers in this space, despite the obstacles that are there, that they decided, I'm going to do this anyway. And to just look at them, I said, look, I'm having a proud sister moment here with y'all. This is like special. And so to this day, when I see them, I'm like, I'm just so proud of you because you are doing it. And it's like that feeling of wanting people to win and wanting your community to win. And so being on that panel was like something special, and just even having follow-up conversations with them, it just makes me want to go harder for them, because it's like you deserve a space in this industry. And the fact that you have carved out a lane for yourself despite all the obstacles and everyone telling you no, whether it be for money or people closing the door on you from investor side, you're still pushing through. And I know how hard you are working. I tell Alyssa, I'm gonna give a shout out to my person too. Alyssa there. I told, it's like we're doing it's easier for us because we're providing the resources, the platform, and are financially. Folks, the organizations and these small businesses, they are in the trenches doing the work. And so I said, when I complain, we can't complain because they are really in the trenches doing the work. So that was really special for me to see that.
Awesome. I think you touched on something that's super important, that's often overlooked, especially for Black folks, right, in this industry. Just Black folks overall in this country, but in this industry exceptionally. One of my immediate past pastor used to have a saying that he would say, "You can't be what you don't see." Right?
Yes.
And so for Black folk in this industry, we can't be the things that we don't see because we don't know that those things exist, and oftentimes those things are hidden from us. And so what I find very interesting is you talked about touching on those pictures that you saw from across the country, right, of your teams working together, of seeing those Black men carving out the lanes, of having people move from skeptical to sure, right? And that happens on both sides of the line. Like, it happens with our community partners, but I also think it happens with our team members and our employees, right? And so that leads me into my next question with you regarding partnerships and really looking at that through the lens of how we work with our employees and how we engage with our employees. And the question that I want to get an answer or a nugget of advice from you all on is, what should we consider when we are beginning that process of engaging our staff into the culture of volunteering and being cheerleaders for not only the community that they're working in, but the communities that they leave and go to when they leave the office. So what should we consider when we begin that process?
I mean, at first, we first have to look at, headquarters, and then retail, and then cultivation, because they all have very different work experiences under the multi-state operation. So looking at, how can we, and we have some really amazing volunteers. I mean, I was blown away by how many folks love volunteering, so that's a blessing. But yeah, looking at how we can develop, and again, it goes back to listening again to understand what's important to your employees, what type of organizations are they members of, what type of organization are they already supporting, and really just being that cheerleader for them. We call them volunteer champions at Green Thumb. And I always tell them, I work for y'all. Y'all tell me, I work for you. You tell me what you need. We've developed a suite of materials for them to make it easier for them to do what they are already doing in their communities outside of GTI. And so, it is just an amazing thing to see how we can just create that in each of those sections and just really listen to what's important to them and help them activate within their communities.
For us, it's also asking. So we'll have a form, everybody from across the U.S. in there. They can just submit a form to us saying, these are the organizations locally that I think we should be supporting through our CSR efforts. This is why, this is what they're looking for, let us know what you think. And what we do is we'll intentionally vet every organization that comes our way, see if there's any reputational risk, and then we'll move forward and saying we can support them in whatever you've asked us to support them. If you're looking for volunteers, time, we can support you doing X, Y, Z. But we're asking our employees intentionally. You work with, you live in this community. I can't tell you what is available in Philadelphia for volunteer time, but you can. So let me know, and then I can go look into that organization. I can help you set something up, and this is how we can move forward. That has been the biggest thing for us, just making sure locally our employees are letting us know what we should be doing.
Yeah, that's a huge part for us too, and we also have volunteer champions at Crespo. There's only so many names we probably call these great staff members, but so our volunteer program really took off in 2020 in the summer, because in response to the murder of George Floyd, our company sort of committed to doing a number of things in the community, whether it's financial contributions, other things, but also volunteering 5,000 hours in the community. And so we're all across the country. It is the middle of a pandemic, and we're trying to figure out how to get this done. Well, we got it done in 6 months, and then we've done an additional 10,000 hours since then. So in the last year and a half, almost 2 years, 15,000 hours of volunteering. And we did that intentionally working with our volunteer champions, a representative from each business unit or facility that meets with us once a month, and we sort of go through how to get these things done. It's a very intentional process. They have all the resources that they need for information or for gathering photographs and that sort of thing. And so there's a whole structure around it, but we also try to meet them where they are. So asking what's important to you and your neighborhood and your community. What are the skills you want to bring to this volunteering as well? So if you are good at helping people build websites or design logos, like, can you help? Is that what you want to help with a nonprofit through that way, or do you want to go and do community cleanups, or sort of what are the ways we can you can do things that matter to you and that use your skills best. And so we've done stuff with the community too, where we'll say, hey, you know, folks who come to Sunnyside, we're actually going to do a community cleanup over here in Schaumburg. If you want to come join us, you should come join us. So engaging the community as well. So I think that people are seeing that we are invested in doing what matters to them, but also find ways to meet them where they are, that not everyone's going to come out there and shovel, you know, things, and not everyone's going to go into a food pantry, but some folks might want to write letters to folks who are experiencing depression or senior citizens who are unable to see their families because of COVID. So we found ways to sort of give folks a diverse opportunity to engage.
Great. Thinking about what you all have shared and kind of going back to something that I asked earlier about, you know, how you've kind of evolved, can you all think, and this is kind of putting you on the spot, so I apologize. Can you all think of a time where you said, you know what, we got this right, and then another time where you're like, ooh, that didn't turn out the way that I wanted it to? I think it's important that we talk about all of the positive, and we talk about all of here are the effective measurements that we have, here are the results that we have where we've had a positive impact, but oftentimes we don't talk about, hey, I missed the mark on this one, right? And I think as people coming into the industry, especially women coming into the industry, we have sometimes been placed in a bubble of where we have to have it perfect, which adds an extra stress layer onto something that we're already carrying a lot of burdens on, right? And so knowing that everybody has a misstep is helpful because we understand that everybody's human. So can you think of that one time where you're like, you know what, we did that. And then that other time where you're like, that didn't go so well and I won't do that ever again.
So I think something that we've done really well, we have our Good Green Grant, and so the good is really the work that we're doing with nonprofit partners where we've provided unrestricted funding to 3 organizations, Why Not Prosper, which supports women who've been formerly incarcerated, Philadelphia Lawyers for Social Equity, which also provides expungement and pardon support to communities, and Innovation Works that really connects investors to Black and brown entrepreneurs. So just seeing, and I've had so many conversations with these nonprofit partners, and just seeing the impact where I think about Why Not Prosper, where they've been able to use the funding that they receive, and it just continues to grow, where they've provided housing to women, or little things like being able to support them to get a license once they are released from prison. You know, people, I don't know if anybody else, but I've been to pick up someone from prison. They just have on sweats and a plastic bag. And it is, you know, that immediate resources that are needed as soon as they are released, it makes it, that's a tangible impact, and it makes a tangible impact in the community. And so just seeing the work that's happened since we announced that grant in 2020 and distributed those funds to those organizations, and have worked with them throughout, like creating that drumbeat of touch points with them to see the progress of the work that they've done. It's been just really amazing to see, amazing to see just their progress, and to continue to work with them. Like, it doesn't stop there. We get the relationship, and like we all talked about, just those creating those long-term relationships, how they've grown. And so I'm excited about, you know, the new group of grantees that'll be announced soon. But yeah, that's something that all of us at GTI are extremely proud of, that Good Green grant effort. Something I feel like was a misstep, like, ooh, that's a tough one. Because I always think of things, you know, look, I was raised by my grandmother, and you learn, it's a learning experience.
Okay. What was that learning experience where you're like, oh, yeah, I can do this a little bit different?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you have to look at, when you're working with multiple partners, and you're working with regulators, and you're working in different markets, just ensuring that, you know, always say when you come to someone's house, you bring a bottle of wine and some flowers. You know, when you're going into these markets, ensuring that you are a partner and knocking on the doors and say, hey, you know, we're coming into your market, and making sure that you go in and say, you know, we're here. We'd love to do business with you, or we'd love to work in your community, and identifying those organizations that are in the community who already have voices in those communities to show that you're a good neighbor, and coming in to not only provide premium product, but you're there to be a good neighbor. So I think that sometimes you can come in really fast, but when you have the opportunity to come in and pause and say, hey, here are the people, the key players, and I want to meet you first, to let you know, and to say, to welcoming us into your space. And we're here to be a friend to you, not, you know, someone who's against you. We're here to be a true partner. So I think that is something where I feel like, because because we're all on a rocket ship in this industry. And sometimes we can move extremely fast, but just something that's simple, like I said, bring that bottle of wine and a flower and say, we're here to be a partner, we're here to be a friend. It's that little bit of just genuine, just pure friendship and kindness. It goes a long way.
I would say for our team, for our CSR team, all the things that we've been doing in the past year have been brand new for us. So every week, every day is a learning experience. Some things go really well, some things not so much. One thing that we have learned is to be more strategic about the partners that we pick. Sometimes, I guess you live and you learn. So you can pick a partner, you can think that the work they're going to do is exactly what you need, but then as you start rolling out that process, they're not communicative, or they're not really, returning on the value that you thought they would initially add. So really just taking the time to make sure we are getting the correct partners, making sure that those partners are following up with us the way that we would need them to, and vice versa, of course. This industry is always changing. Making sure that we don't make a promise that we can't follow up on as well, knowing that everything is so dynamic.
One of the things that I think we've done a couple things I'm really proud of. One is actually kind of a strange thing to think of as being a win, but when I started at Cresco, my colleague Michael Self, who runs our social equity program, the SEED program, we'd applied for the same job. And it was a combined sort of CSR/social equity job. And Cresco split it up into two jobs, one person for each, and they put her in the right spot, me in the right spot based on our experiences. I think creating in our company a space to do different things that are linked, I think that it's been a good way for us to focus on social equity and really give it all the attention that it needs, focus on CSR initiatives, but not try to conflate the two, because for us, we have two very different leaders that are the right fits for these jobs, and that was, I think, a wise move from a sort of a corporate level. I'm thinking of an example, too, where we had a partner for Veterans Day, and our marketing and branding team wanted to figure out a campaign. We're going to give a donation to them as part of Veterans Day initiative. And the team came up with the logo and the plan for the activation. And we talked to our partners, and we were like, okay, well, what do you think? And they said, this is not, you don't do this, or maybe don't do that, or like, how about this? These are things that if you're looking at veterans on the margins, this is not going to land well with them, or things have changed since, in the last couple of years. The American flag doesn't mean what it used to, the way that you put that on your ads and that sort of thing. So to have our partner come in and be able to help our team think through a bigger project, that really felt meaningful to us to engage in that sort of next level way. And I think one of the things that, just being more intentional, you were talking about with partnerships, when I first came, it was sort of like, we don't have a department, but we're going to try to just do good works. And so I think we've gotten better along the last couple of years of being strategic and more thoughtful about how we engage, when and how, and planning out the year in advance. Because I think that there was a lot of, and we're still reactive, and everyone sort of is in this growing industry, but certainly the beginning of things was much more reactive than it is now.
You all, the reoccurring theme that I'm hearing is making power moves without being overpowering, right?
Yeah.
And engaging and connecting. And so what's the one thing that you wish you knew when you started that you want to share with women coming into this industry?
Be prepared for constant change. Constant change.
That part. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things I guess it's because I was just listening to all the different panels, and don't be afraid of criticism, of when you're meeting with nonprofit partners or you're meeting with brand founders. I don't look at it as an attack onto the organization that I represent or an attack onto me. You have to be really secure with yourself and say, I know who I am. Like, I know what my intentions are. I know where my heart is. So I'm going to take this, because this has nothing to do with me personally. I'm going to take this information and see how I can strategically develop programming that supports your needs. So, so even when, I spoke with other panelists who stopped when I heard their conversation, I'm like, well, come talk to me. What did you mean by that? What can I do? So that type of, I don't take, so I feel like coming in, sometimes you can think like, oh, this is great, but you're going to get hit because of just the history of this industry. And one of the other panelists, Belisha, was talking about the history and the correction that needs to happen. So there's a obligation for organizations like ours to support Black and Brown communities in a way like no other industry. It is very unique. So you're going to always get hit with criticism, but the way you take it in is, it'll be a sink or swim type of situation in terms of the success of your programs, I think.
Those two things for sure. And I think just from a bigger standpoint outside of sort of the CSR world, that the industry is so new, so that means there's so much excitement and enthusiasm, but also so many things you can build, grow, and fix and learn from. And so I wasn't quite ready for the opportunity, actually, in the industry, and also be ready for managing your authenticity and like who you really are with this new environment. Because I've been a lawyer for 13 years. Being in a law firm, being in a legal practice is very different than being, I was in the city of Chicago early in my career. Very different than being in the financial services industry or nonprofits where I've worked. So each environment was different, but cannabis is like a weird mix of all of them. And so I was just not prepared, I think, for how complex it is, what the opportunities are, and the challenges that we would face, some of my colleagues and I, with being intersectional people in this very complex industry with a painful history as well.
Great. I had one other question, and then I wanted to give the audience maybe two questions to ask. I know that we started a little bit late, so if you can give me a little grace and then give us a couple of minutes to run over. How can we as a collective use our voices, networks, and our power and authority, because power and authority are two very different things, to really support philanthropy in the community and within our organization as women?
I mean, just the fact that 3 Black women in here in senior positions sitting on this panel, this is major. We talked about this before, and being able to amplify and show that we are here and working with the nonprofits and letting them know that we are here and you have a champion on your side. I feel like it's major. It's the, knowing that even when I talked about the businesses and amplifying their voices, something as simple as providing them a platform to say, here's your business. We work with Lisa with the Chicago Reader to say, here's a platform for you to talk about your nonprofit and what you're doing. The more that we can show what the nonprofits are doing and to really amplify the voices that they already have, the better. And it's just being able to show the stories of Black and brown women and men in this space to show, like you said, you have to see to believe that you can be, you have to see it. And so having these type of platforms and, to have us here to sit and to show that we exist and working with the nonprofit partners to show that they have champions in these spaces, I feel like that's
Definitely leverage your platform to just live authentically in the fact that we consume cannabis, we work in cannabis, we promote cannabis. The more that we just live that authentically, the easier it's going to be to push forward in this industry, because the more it's stigmatized just in your everyday life, the harder it is for us to do the work that we do. We shouldn't have to justify the plant anymore at this point, but we do. So just living authentically in the fact that we consume, we educate, and we help the community with what we do, or at least we try to.
And I agree with all the things you guys have said as well. And I think, I don't know, that one of the things that I for sure forgot what you asked. I'm sorry.
Shiny thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do we as a collective use our voices to amplify, use our power, authority in organizations?
So one of the things that I found as a Black woman, as someone who has a very diverse background, is to make it my mission to normalize and professionalize. The way that our company feels that way, to personally be an advocate for cannabis, for the industry, for Black and brown people who are trying to enter this industry, those who are trying to do ancillary businesses, sort of to be a person who they can talk to, a resource, talking to friends and family about joining the industry, finding opportunities to share with them. And being, I think, open to the fact that people have questions and they're not always ready to ask them or not sure what to ask. So making myself creating a space where people can be authentic and share with me and be, ask those kind of questions, I think is, I hope to be able to do that for people.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom. Are there questions? We can take maybe 1 to 2. All right, can you tell us your name and what your role is in this industry or what you're aspiring to be?
Hello, my name is Lana. I'm on the Hi.
Hi.
because it's been very helpful to me. I have a question for all three of you. I want to know, because you say what like bigger companies, I want to know if you personally know how many Black trans women, how many Indigenous women, how many Indigenous queer experience people work in your company, or on the boards of your company, or have director positions in your company. The same question actually goes for IWC, because a quick look at your website tells me they don't feel white Catholic people on your board. So it's very important to me, especially because I'm trying to go into the world, but from what I'm seeing right now, it's kind of disappointing because it is basically just justifying medicine is what people are doing here nowadays. Because to me personally, it is medicine. As an Indigenous person, Indigenous folks use this as medicine.
Okay, so let me make sure I'm getting your question, because I want to make sure that we leave space for everyone, and we're being mindful of the grace that we've been given to run over. So your question is how their familiarity and knowledge base as to the number of queer, trans, and other lifestyle or identifications, I should say, exist in their entities, and possibly.
Should not be put in different little groups because we are folks. This is why there's so much.
Okay, so let me give them an opportunity to try to answer that and to move forward with that to help you get some resolution to what you're seeking. So can you all provide that?
In case they don't know, then I would invite them to do the research and to actually advocate for that.
Perfect, thank you so much. So are you aware of that data, and is that data being compiled? And then what space can we create to acknowledge and incorporate that data and those people those are their identities? How are we going to incorporate that into your business and into your spaces?
Yeah, so we are is a high momentum at GTI in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and we actually, like, even just with the panel that we heard earlier, I thought to myself, should we call it DE&I anymore? You know, what should it be in terms of really saying the names and identifying people who they are and calling them by their name, Black, Brown, Indigenous, you know, instead of this larger umbrella approach. You know, in terms of working with the Native community, we've had partnerships with the Shinnecock Nation, working with amazing, dynamic Native American and Black woman, Shanae Bullock. And so actively reaching out to communities to figure out what is it that we can do to support in terms of to bring more Native, Black women and Latino women, men and women into our space. But we're definitely looking at that it is high priority for GTI and something that I spearhead with our head of HR in terms of developing that programming to figure out ways that we can not only just recruit and hire people of color, but create an inclusive environment for them within GTI, because you can bring folks in by the troves, but you know, when they're there, do they feel like they belong? And I feel like and honestly, for me as a Black woman, and I'm not just saying this because I work for Green Thumb, but coming into a space where you feel like you feel valued, and coming to a space where you feel heard, where you come into the table with your senior leadership and they want to listen, not only listen to what you say, but you see action behind it, and action and funding and resources to support the work that you're doing. So that is definitely a priority. And you know, when I first started at GTI, I met Shanae Bullock at an event in New York, Women of Color event, and I said, we have to have to let people know that, you know, you have a space in this conversation. So it's definitely something that we have looked at GTI.
At Curaleaf, we are compiling that data. We've been spending the last year trying to figure out where are we at diversity-wise? Where can we be better? What are we doing in our hiring practices to make sure we are reaching out to the same communities that we're trying to help with our CSR efforts? So are we at where we want to be? No. Our industry has been very, very white for forever. So it's really, how do we break past that? What have we been doing that has not been working? What organizations do we need to work with that can help us do intentional hiring? What do we need to do with our HR department to make sure that when we are doing that intentional hiring, we're actually getting these people, rolling them in, onboarding them properly? Are you happy here? Is this process of transitioning into this industry easy for you? What can we do to make that better? So are we at where we want to be? By no means. We have a plan to hopefully be there in the next few years, and we're really just assessing what we have been doing and implementing things as we go.
Yeah, our diversity, equity, inclusion programming is continuing to evolve and hitting different areas. So not only, we talked about talent acquisition, maintaining folks once they're at the company, but then also finding ways to work with more diverse vendors, which would include all the communities we talked about. And so one way that our team specifically is trying to help that effort is to work with our community partners that represent such diverse segments of the population to understand specific needs more. So not just to understand this sort of diversity umbrella, but we're talking to folks, whether it's regional or there are different issues that we see with all different groups, but also they're more complex even than that. So trying to learn from the folks that we're working with how we can do better, and not expecting them to solve our problems for us, but knowing that they're a resource and we are as well. So if we have a hiring opportunity and that sort of thing, to be able to push those jobs out to them and connect people directly with our HR and talent acquisition, we have to be more intentional, we have to be more active.
So I'm going to thank you all for your intentionality and your vulnerability and your ability and willingness to share with us what you know to help us to be better in this industry. I want to be mindful we have another group that's coming in at 3 o'clock on marketing and branding, I believe, in cannabis. So thank you all for your attentiveness. I appreciate it. Again, I'm Dr. Angelyn Anderson with HC23 Growers. Hope you all are enjoying the conference.
Thank you, Angelyn. Oh, you guys are so good.
Great work.
Yeah.